Many years ago, my father gave me a green Army footlocker, and in this locker was a collection of things that he had accumulated over the years of his military career. A lot of these things I was familiar with because I was alive during the times when he was an Army recruiter in Illinois. So there were a lot of letters of commendation in there and recruiting materials that he had and things that I had seen and I knew about. But also in the box were things from World War II. His Paratrooper jump pants, the Bible that he carried throughout the war, among other things like swords and bayonets and a sword from a Nazi officer, just all kinds of things. And this was a part of his military career that I was not familiar with. I knew he was in World War II, but he never talked about it my whole entire life. It was always a big mystery to me. I knew it affected him, and I knew he didn't like to talk about it. But in 2007, I asked him to record his entire life story and to not leave anything out. So on a little micro-cassette tape recorder, he did just that. He told me his entire life story, including his time in the battlefield in World War II.
My name is Marvin D. Cornett. The D stands for Dempsey. I was born July the 1st, 1921 in Lynch Mines, Kentucky. And my folks moved to Harlan, and they lived down there for a very short time till they moved up to Tots, Kentucky. Tots is about 50 miles from Harlan. Tots was a coal mining town, company run, lock, stock, and barrel. Just before I left to go to the Army, I was working as a bartender. They sold beer and shots of liquor. They sold food too. A guy by the name of Clayton Phillips come in one day and he said, I hear you talking about going to the Army. And I said, yeah, I am. He said, well, I'd like to go with you. So we hitchhiked over to Norton, Virginia to the recruiting station. I was underweight. I think I weighed 108 pounds, and it had to be 115. And I drank a lot of water and ate a lot of bananas before I went upstairs to see that recruiting sergeant. Well, I think he gave me some pounds anyway because they accepted me. Part of November 1942, I volunteered for the Paratroopers, and we shipped out to Fort Benning, Georgia. Went through parachute training with other guys from Carlisle that had volunteered. I graduated New Year's Day in 1943. Graduated and signed to what they call the frying pan of Fort Benning, where they was forming a new regiment, the 513th. They made me assistant squad leader. Then we went to the Alabama area for advanced training, where we went out bivouacked and rifle range, machine gun ranges, and infiltration courses, stuff like that. And then I got orders. That's where I got orders to go to overseas, and we didn't know where we were going. It was so secret back then. We had no idea where we were going. There was about 500 of us that got orders, and we got on the train. And I think it was 2 days later we finally knew that we was heading to New York. Camp Shanks was pretty close to New York City, just across the Hudson River. We didn't know how long we was going to be there, knew nothing about it anyway, but they had MPs on the gate. They wouldn't let nobody out. And one time a platoon of us got together, and like we was training, and one of the sergeants in charge Double time was right out the main gate. We got outside, we went out and started hitchhiking into New York City. Heck, I got to see some of the sites I'd read about, the Stage Door Canteen, Jack Dempsey Restaurant, Times Square, and all of them places like that, and some of them honky-tonk places. We had dance halls where you give a dime to the bell sound or something, and then you had to give another dime to the woman you was dancing with. That was something. But they finally said, this is it, and we got our duffel bags and our rifles, and they put us on a train and took us right down to the port, and we got off and got on the Staten Island ferry and went over to Staten Island. There sent the big transport ships. They did everything by night. The convoys would all leave at night. Those transports back then, the bunks in them holes were 6 high, 6 people straight up and down, and we ate 2 meals a day because there was about 15,000 troops on that ship, and that's where we found out we was tangled up with the 82nd Airborne Division, and we were fillers for them. The next morning after we got on, I got up on deck and I could see the skyline, and then they had all those blimps in the air escorting us out. And as far as you could see ships of all description. We even had a battleship, Texas was with us, destroyers, troop transports, all kinds of cargo ships. It was really something. And 2 times our ship broke down. It was the USS George Washington, and we knew it stopped. We went up on deck, and here's one destroyer circling us, and we're dead in the water. Well, it wasn't long till they got it going again, but that happened again one night later. But then we caught up with a convoy because the convoy was zigzag, and I guess the ship was go straight. We finally got into Casablanca and to the harbor there, and it was a French battleship sunk there. You see all kinds of stuff, and that's my first experience with the Arab people.
Airborne forces, paratroops, and airborne infantry are the newest arm of the service, but one which has already won its spurs on the battlefields in North Africa. A demonstration of cooperative effort by glider-borne and parachute troops seen for the first time in combined operations. The paratroops' job is to act as shock troops, capture an airfield, seize a position, or disrupt communications in the rear of the enemy. Most of their weapons are collected from containers released from the plane by easily identifiable parachutes. Now they set about their swift attack.
While we were getting off of the ship, they were loading German prisoners on. They was going in one end and we were going out the other. A lot of the prisoners were wounded because they was carrying them on stretchers. And what we did, we marched through town, Casablanca, up to the railroad station, and they put us on trains. And we went out about 5 or 6 miles out of town to where we set up a camp with pup tents. So eventually, one afternoon, we got orders that the beachhead was in trouble at Salerno, and they was about ready to push the beachhead into the ocean. So they loaded us up, and we took off that night and dropped into Salerno, and there we had a battle up at Alavilla. After the battle was over, put us on LCIs, and then we went up just below Naples and tried to cut the Germans off, but they'd already pulled out, so it was a pretty easy go into Naples. When we went in that night, it was eerie because there was nobody stirring. The Italians were all held up. But the next morning it came alive, and all of them started yelling and screaming. The first night there, we bivouacked on top of a building, but the next day my outfit moved into a prison that had been abandoned. The Germans had let the prisoners loose. We slept on the floor in the guards' rooms, but the place had been shot up. There's a lot of bullet holes. Prisons had a factory down in the basement. I got guard duty one night down there. That was an eerie thing. Even though I had a sub-Thompson machine gun and a flashlight, I didn't like that one bit. But while we were there, we mainly did patrol duty on the streets because they had martial law at night. About the third night there, the Germans, that's when they started doing their thing with their aircraft. MJU-88s would drop bombs 2 or 3 times a week. And we'd haul the tail down to in the basement section of the prison. But I was sort of glad when we got orders that we're going to the front. They picked 2 people out of each platoon to be mule skinners. When we up in the mountains of Italy, the jeeps couldn't get up there. Of course, that was before helicopters. And we would have to take ammunition and rations, haul them up. But it was really interesting. I hadn't had much experience with horses or mules, but anyway, we made pack mules out of them. Anyway, these big mules, they were brought from Texas. That was rough going up there in the mountains of Italy. Around Thanksgiving of '43, we had pulled off the line back into a village, and everybody just went into a house and made themselves at home. And they brought up the Thanksgiving dinner in the containers that kept stuff warm, and I couldn't eat. I was really sick. So word got back to one of the officers, and they sent a medic down and took my temperature. And they said, this guy's got to go to the hospital. There was a truck there that was going back that brought the rations up. I had to take a prisoner back. And I was shaking so bad, I think I scared the hell out of that prisoner. I got up in the front of the back of the truck, and he was had him in the back. And I kept my rifle on him all the time, but I can imagine the poor guy was scared the way I was shaking. But he's probably glad it was over anyway for him. So he took me back to field hospital. Then from there, the next day, they took me down to Naples to the hospital. They kept me in the hospital, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, and then released me to a convalescent hospital there in Naples, and I stayed there 4 or 5 days, and then I went and rejoined my unit. They were getting ready for another operation, but we had sand tables of where we were supposed to jump, and they'd go in there and look the sand tables over, and so they'd tell us what was going on. But then a couple of days later, they changed the plan and said we're going to go in by boat. We went down to the seaport one afternoon and boarded LCIs. Those are landing craft infantry, and they hold about 125 men. They'll take a company. Just about dark, we pulled out. A bunch of other ships pulled out and headed up the coast. The next morning, we could see what was going on. We looked around, there were ships all around us, all, and they circled, and then we made a run for the beach. And I don't know, half a dozen LCIs were hitting the beach at the same time. Just before we hit the beach, the German dive bombers come in out of the sun behind us, strafing and dropping bombs, and they sunk LCI on our right. I think it was D Company. I don't know how many men got killed or wounded, but anyway, about that time they let the ramps down, and then we'd wade towards the beach. So happened that they hit a sandbar, and it was it was about waist deep when I got off, but started wading in and was up to my chin. I was getting ready to throw some stuff away. I had 2 boxes of ammunition, and then we hit the beach. At that time, another German aircraft was strafing. I did get a few shots off, laying on my belly, but we did see one of the planes smoking as it went over the horizon. We got together, and then we went out on a dirt road and started single filing on each side of the road towards where the Germans were at. And they ran into a German motorcycle and come charging around, killed the guy driving and the officer in the sidecar. And then we went up and started digging in on the Mussolini Canal. And we were there for about 5 or 6 days, running patrol out every night. They were shelling us. They blew the bridges up right in front of us. And then on the 30th of January, we got relieved. The 45th Infantry Division relieved us, but we went parallel up the canal to attack the Germans up there. And that was the longest day of my life, I can tell you that, because we started out about 9 o'clock at night. By the time at daybreak, the point guys had knocked out a German machine gun, and the Germans were all around us. I could hear them talking. In fact, they let a motorcycle come down and right by us, never fired, which is a good thing, because there was a German tank in the trees on the left-hand side, and our bazooka man let one go, and all it did was ricochet off the tank. But then the tank pulled out. There was big 2-story houses around us. We had been told to take all the hand grenades we could carry and to throw them in a window if we went by. Scott and I, we got in one house, and we was up on the 2nd floor shooting, and I saw this German run around the back of the house across the road, and he run behind a haystack. So I started shooting into the haystack, but I noticed the bullets ricocheted off of the haystack. I had some anti-tank piercing shells mixed in with an incendiary, which would light up. So I knew that there was something in that haystack, and so I went downstairs, and by that time a little light tank had showed up, and I told the guys, I said, there's something in that haystack. By that time, we were shooting in the house because it was getting far from the house. The light tank went over, and this lady's barreled down in one of the windows and let a round off, and 42 Germans come out of that house, and what I had fired into in the haystack was a half-track type vehicle. So we captured them 42 and put them on that half-track. It was all over it with a couple of guards and sent them back to the rear. Then we went on up to the canal. About that time, they blew the bridge right in front of us across the canal. But then we started hitting up on the houses across the canal, and that's when Mike got shot in the head. And I later saw him at Fort Bragg. He survived. He went back to Walter Reed, but he got shot, knocked his helmet off. And about that time, mortars came in on us, and artillery. And that's when I got blew up in the air. And that was a long day. The medics then sent me back to the evacuation, back to the hospital set up on the beach, which was still in artillery range because they killed some nurses shooting in there. And they evacuated me back to Naples again to the 29th General Hospital up on the hill. In the meanwhile, all of us paratroopers didn't know what to do with us after the 504 left, and they sent us back to North Africa on a British transport. Went back there, and they would shuffle us from one camp to another. From Bizerti in Tunisia, we went back to Sicily, to Palermo. Then went down to a paratrooper camp where they was using it for resupply and training about 50 miles away, called Trapani. And then they sent us back to Italy. Went across the Messina Straits on a ferry, boarded the train, and then took us up to Rome. And Rome had fell meanwhile. Then we get up there, we stayed around for 3 or 4 days, then they sent us back to Naples again. And the first thing you know, I couldn't believe this, they've scheduled us to come back to the States. Hospital ship troop transport combination. Went back to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, stayed around for about a week, and then they finally sent us to distribution points. I went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, stayed there for 3 or 4 days. They gave me a 30-day leave. What a deal. With orders after the 30-day to report to Miami Beach, Florida, for recuperation, 2-week recuperation leave. What a life. After that was over, and living the life of Raleigh in a fancy hotel, went back to Fort Benning, the paratrooper unit. I was interviewed by some officer in the parachute school, and they decided I'd go to be an instructor in what they call D-stage pack. D-stages was the final week of training of the paratroopers, and you supervised the packing of their live parachutes, which they were going to jump. You got them ready, you went out in the field, you supervised everything they did, you bring them back, and supervise packing the parachute they're going to jump the next day.